Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first in a series of events looking at past finalists of the Urbanism Awards. A reminder that we are recording today's session for the Academy's YouTube channel. If you have any questions and comments, please leave those in the chat box and we will pick those up towards the end of the session. And next week, at this time, we'll be focusing on the great towns. Please join us to hear from Derry, Londonderry, Paisley and Frome. Looking a little bit further ahead, our next major event will be on the subject of landscape and urbanism. We will hear from speakers from Europe and the US on the subject of designing with nature in town and city. A big thank you to the Academy's sponsors for their support for this event and other events we hold throughout the year. And now it's time to hand over to our chair for today's session, Victoria Whenray, who's partner of Conran and Partners. Victoria, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen, and welcome to everyone to this year's programme, Urbanism Awards Revisited. As you're aware, unfortunately, we've not been able to conduct our usual awards programme, so we're presenting a series of lunchtime sessions celebrating and revisiting some of the best finalists and winners from each of the categories. And we're actually really excited by this. I'm very proud to be chairing the inaugural event today, which is Great European Cities. And it's with great pleasure that we welcome Aarhus, Bilbao and Utrecht. We visited Aarhus in 2014, and it was celebrated for its and recognised for its strong governance and commitment to empowering people. And today we welcome city architect Stephen Willacy. He has a lovely quote from one of his TED Talks, city people are human beings. We visited Bilbao in 2017, where we were very impressed how the city transformed its economic fortunes following a serious post-industrial decline of the 1990s. And today we'll be hearing and welcome to Councillor Asier Abaunza, whose portfolio extends to the future urban planning for the city of Bilbao. And whilst in some ways it seems like a million years ago, it was only last year that we visited Utrecht in the Netherlands and experienced at first hand their concept of healthy urban living. Utrecht, by the way, has recently been recognised as the world's most bicycle-friendly city, so we look forward to hearing a little bit about that also. And to speak about Utrecht, we welcome Erlijn Mulder, who leads on international and strategic affairs. In terms of themes, we've discussed at some length the overarching theme for today's talk, and actually at this time, it's probably pertinent to say a very quick thank you to fellow lead assessors Philip Jackson and David Lum. We've had a hugely interesting discussions in the lead up to today's event with the city participants, and super excited to have such a great group of people. And whilst it's certainly true to say that the pandemic has been a part of the discussion, what really engaged our interest was the significant journey that these cities have undertaken. This has included a review of their values and how to place people at the heart of their decision making in order to create resilient cities, actually no matter the particular crisis. And we've asked the impossible of our guests, that is to cover the great things these cities have been doing in a mere 15-minute presentation. So, however, that is our challenge, and I've been advised, and I apologise up front if I have to play bad cop at all. We'll follow, as Stephen mentioned, with a Q&A, and we welcome questions from attendees. So please use the panel on the right-hand side and post questions, and we'll do our best to track these. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, Stephen Willacy, who's going to talk to us about Aarhus. Stephen, how are you fixed there?
I'm going for this now. Great, I'll just go back one. Thank you. It's very nice to be with you all again. I've called this talk Aarhus Revisited, an inclusive city and a good city for everyone. And just for those who are not familiar where we are, this is just to show where home is where the heart is. Although I originally come from the Lake District in the UK, I've been living here for nearly 35 years. We were invited in 2015 to be a candidate for European City of the Year, and we were very honoured to do this. And since then, we've been included in many events, and not least in your beautiful magazine, Here and Now, which are these 2 front covers. And we also had, I think, for the first time, a European Congress meeting in Aarhus in 2017, when we were the European Capital of Culture. And this event was coincided with the Nordic City Network. So it was a fantastic meetup of British, international personalities from all over the world and meeting in Scandinavia. So that was a great opportunity to share. And Aarhus has gone through quite an interesting process over the last 25 years. We've been trying to reconnect with our heritage. And today it looks something like this from a helicopter. So we've opened up the river and opened up the harbour front from being an industrial harbour to becoming a recreational space. Now, our city members, 31 of them, every year, every 4 years after the elections, develop this idea called the Aarhus narrative. And we have the basic guideline for everything we do is to make a good city for everyone. And as we're growing with approximately 5,000 citizens a year, at the moment we're 350,000. So by 2050, we expect to be around 450,000 people. So we have to take care in how we develop that growth. So one of the possibilities is that I'm developing a new policy for architecture and livability, where this map is actually the map of Aarhus, just a landscape without the city on it. And the idea is that the policy is taking is the point of departure in the landscape and its people. Every second year we do a temperature, take the temperature of the Aarhus citizens, where we ask, what does especially make Aarhus a good city for you? And comes out on top with 37% cultural life, the relationship to the nature and green areas, size of the city, student life and atmosphere. And these are really important for me when we talk about this new policy, because we try to make this policy relevant for everyone in Aarhus. As you can see from this beautiful map, within 15 minutes of the cathedral, you can actually come out in environments like this. So we've always talked of the city as being a walkable and cyclable city, but it's also accessible. And the idea of working locally has become a driving force. Now we talk about placemaking, not just in terms of physical terms, but in relationship to the people who are living there. And this is the most important point here, because they're the experts. They know their neighborhoods better than we do as planners, and we have to listen to them. And so we've developed this adage from Jan Gehl, where we talk, for many years, we've developed the city around the buildings, and now we've turned it on its head, and we talk about the urban life before we design the urban realm, and then we can design the buildings. And of course, it's back and forth, but it's just to stress the point of departure is in actual the life and the urban realm itself, rather than just the buildings. And each time we develop a new project, we ask the question of the developer or the building owners, which new qualities does your project give back to the city? And they have to remember it's a privilege to build in Aarhus. And this is something everyone has to remind themselves of. So with this point of departure, the urban life, the urban realm, and the buildings themselves, we have the focus around the Aarhusians, the citizens of Aarhus. And of course, we're working with the SDGs, and these are the ones I'd like to focus on today, and they'll come up again during the talk, in relationship to the social capital and social inclusiveness of the city. The city is broken down into several areas. We have 34 local citizen councils in Aarhus, and they're a bridge building group, body of people who represent the local citizens and the societies, and they're like connection to our city, the politicians themselves, but also us who are working within the council. So whenever we want to reach out to the local communities, we go via these different local citizen councils. And it's a very important point for us when we talk about citizen engagement. We have several other options and ways of working with the citizens. This is the Domen. You'll see in the upper right-hand picture here, this is from when we had the Congress meeting. We had a meeting there, It was a great day, but now it's become the domain for the All Citizens House. So loads of activities are taking place with its own homepage and lots of different aspects in terms of the climate and green change around of the city. We have a little building here, a pavilion in town called the Seed, Frø in Danish. It's an urban gardening facilitator center. So all citizens can come here with an idea and we will help them try to develop their thoughts in relationship to urban gardening or working with the urban realm. And we facilitate these possibilities. Similarly, when we have projects we're working with, we make opportunities for people to come and talk and contribute. And this is one of my colleagues, Tina, who's from the town mayor's department, who's responsible for citizens engagement. And this object here, I'm winding, turning around here, is actually a speaker. So I can actually listen to what the idea of the project is. So it's accessible to everyone, even wheelchair users or children. Similar urban gardening projects, they're all over the city. You see them here, one of them center and the upper one is from Aarhus. The one on the left, that's me actually building some urban planters. We've got some local architect students to design them for us and we started building them. And some of the projects that's become more permanent, for example, here on Aarhus, on the island out in the harbour area. And it's become very popular. And some of the ideas were supposed to move into the area, but the local citizens were not totally enamored by the idea of having lots of people making small gardens. But we can come back to that in Q&A. Other possibilities, we build small pavilions. We encourage the local citizens to help build them. And these are small meeting points, very cheaply made, but they become really good pointers for local citizens to hang out. They come from all walks of life and can meet in these places. My town mayor, Abaunza, has written this book called Willacy. In English, you could translate it to root shoot, but you'll see here that number 17 of the SDGs, the partnerships for the goals, is a very important driver for the way we work in terms of partnership working with citizens. This is an example of such a case. This is the town mayor, Mr. Abaunza, talking to Mads Peter Lausen from the Gusbane or the old freight yard. And he's developed a strategy for this local group to participate in the planning process. And he's given them 500,000 kroner to develop this. And he calls them the stone in our shoe, because he thinks it's very important that we don't just have these rapid processes, but we also have an inclusive platform where everyone's invited in. And this is where Mads Peter and his group work very closely. So this is the areas as it was where I think the last time the Academy of Urbanism visited us, but the whole thing has become a kind of temporary permanent planning process where there's space or place for the quirky. This is an area where we have over 80 VAT registered startup companies, and they work in such objects, containers stacked. We also have the possibility, for example, here of the Viking Club at which it meets every week and has a battle. You can see this guy's wine over at his compatriots over here on the left-hand side. And it's quite an amazing event watching these grown-ups hit each other. Just around the corner, this is a weekly project meeting with two of my colleagues working with Lars and Camilla, working with these citizens here. And these are the projects that have been approved and on site at the moment. We have a group of citizens who are often referred to as homeless, and I call them city people, as Victoria says, because they're human beings, and they use the city as their living room. And I think it's important to remember this when we talk about having an inclusive society. We're trying to create possibilities. For example, this last image here is an area in town which is cause a lot of concern, because there are a lot of people who hang out here because they sleep in a building next door. And we're trying to encourage a new area in this freight yard area where you can actually sit and be comfortable. And these are all the different types of users that can be there. The one on the left here is under the bridge. It's called Sound City. It's an amazing venue where there's lots of different activities going on. There were possibilities for city people to hang out here. Another one is the Southern Harbour District. And this is where we actually work very closely with these challenged groups of people. And it's through dialogue that we actually encourage these types of activities. This is a specially made football pitch for this certain group. And this is where we have, if you can see in my hand, this is called Cllr Cafe. That's like waste food that comes from containers from shopping areas, and it's transformed into food for different groups of people. Here in the left-hand corner, this is where you can actually be delivered your drugs, narco, and it's a protected area for them. And it's like this all over this district. These people in the center here, in the yellow jackets, they're city people who have a job, become rented or borrowed to go and tidy up certain areas, and they get a wage for doing that. This is from the actual celebration, rethink activism from when we had during 2017, Nordic work. This whole area is transformed to work with this whole spectrum of the different facets of social inclusion and how do we work with different bodies of people. So it's a kind of a holistic methodology around working with the city. These are all the different SDGs we're working with simultaneously in the different magistrates in the city. Another interesting example, which is completely different, of course, because the city is not just one group of people, there's many different types. This is the whole harbour area which is transformed. And we made this beach bar, which was moved around 3 or 4 different sites during as the area is being developed. It became kind of a platform for discussing a meeting to talk about how this area should develop. And this is how that temporary bar has become a permanent one in the plans for this area working with at the moment. And this is what it looks like now. This is the big housing project. And the beautiful thing about this was we invented a new procurement route where we said whoever wins this project has to deliver 3,000 square meters of public related activities, because at the time when we were designing this was none. And that's come around with this beautiful swimming area. And this really interesting, it's behind this wall of different activities is a building site, which is on the go at the moment. So during the summer period, the people from Institute for X who are working on the old freight yard have built these units for different shops, cafes, restaurants, and different clubs to come down here and take it over. And this is something that's given a very nice edge to everything. And spontaneous events starts happening in the area. You can see this small speaker. This provides the music for this dancing group. Similarly, we have temporary projects, and this is where it becomes really interesting in that during the festival week we have every year, this was one on Aarhus Island here where we had a temporary forest. Similarly, we were trying to reach out to lots more different types of citizens. We've got this telephone box which we can transport around the city so citizens can call in and record ideas for their local community. This is another example from Copenhagen, from Blocks Hub, where you can actually have a door like this and you can position it in your city and you can talk with another city through that door. It's a little bit like Harry Potter, I suppose. We can actually reach out to a city, and I'd love to have one in Bilbao, one in Utrecht, and one in Aarhus, so we could all talk together. It would be wonderful. And at the moment, all our citizen engagement meetings are taking place online. This is a team citizen engagement meeting. These are my colleagues in the department. This is just a test event before a meeting. They don't look too happy, I'm sorry to say, but the idea is that we have these events nearly sometimes 3 times a week, and we're actually reaching out to another group of people. One of the most challenged housing areas of Aarhus is called Gellerop and Toveshøj, and when the Academy of Urbanism visited Aarhus back in 2015, we visited this area, and you'll see from these images here, things have happened over the last 5 years. A large proportion of the population here are under the age of 19. So when we talk about urban development and inclusive processes, it's also important to have the youngsters involved as well. So we got Lego to sponsor millions of pieces of Lego, and they could build their own city. And we use that as a kind of a tool to discuss the way we want that area to develop. There's over 80 different nationalities here, and there's lots of different societies, and we reach out to them and talk to them as much as possible. one of the greatest bonding agents is sport, and this is the multi-use football pitch. And I have to say, it's just been an incredible success. A vast majority of the people playing football here are girls, and it's a great binding agent to the community. Because there's so many, we also have to include them in the planning. So a lot of the processes take 20, 30 years. So this one called Instant City is something which has been very important. The two projects here are temporary projects, and the youngsters can participate in them. I would like to finally finish off by talking about the city as a laboratory. Here we have a project which was built during one of the summer festival week projects on the main railway station. Looked like this beforehand. During the 10 days it took place, it was transformed into this, a beautiful people-centric space. And underneath those people sitting there are all the bus shelter stops. So they took the seating away, and then the whole place could carry on working as normal. But it was a spontaneous event, and lots of activities took place, lots of spontaneous activities. This is kind of I can't remember the circus artist type of activity. I think it was breakdancing. Another one was two different parks split by a road. This is the town hall in the bottom corner. We put a layer of grass across and brought it together to make one park, and people just loved it. And it was a great opportunity. The citizens, it was discussed in the newspaper, the politicians were challenged. Why can't we close that road down? Why can't we connect it together? And another one finally here was a 10-day forest on the central space right in front of the cathedral. This picture is taken from the cathedral. And within seconds of taking the fence down, it looked like this. And it was like this for 10 days and nights. And finally, the wonderful thing about these challenging projects is this area next to it is a parking area right next to the cathedral. And we've took the idea of making a temporary process here. And the wonderful thing is, it only cost 5.5 million krona. If it was permanent, it would probably cost 10 times as much. The point is, the politicians are willing to take chances and test things if it's temporary, and we can experiment. And that's why I think it's another way of engaging with the community, the society, the citizens, the employees in the council, and the politicians through these types of projects.
That's great, Stephen. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt.
Final picture. That's it.
You did very well.
The last one here is we've just removed a piece of sculpture and replaced it with a piece of landscaping to allow us to start a new dialogue about the future of the inner city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen.
Can you close me off? I'll stop sharing. Yeah.
I think so. Thank you, Stephen. That was very good timing. Much appreciated. Really enjoyed this idea of taking the temperature every 2 years, and maybe we can have touch on that a little bit later.
Yeah.
So next up we have Councillor Asier Abaunza, and he will be talking about Bilbao. Asier, how are you getting on with your connection there? Hello.
Hello. I think you can show now the presentation.
Yes, no, we can see you. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I will try to fix to my time. I know that we have not so much left. As introduction, I will talk a little bit about the whole area of Bilbao, the metropolitan area. Bilbao, the metropolitan area, is composed of 35 municipalities. It's along the Ibaizabal River, as you can see in the picture. Bilbao is occupying the middle part of the valley. The old town is here, you see the pointer. We are 14 kilometers far from the sea, but the sea gets till the old town. So the port was occupying all the riverbanks in the middle of the city. In terms of population, the city is middle-sized city with 350,000 inhabitants. And the metropolitan area is around 1 million inhabitants. We are the 5th largest metropolitan area in Spain. The other characteristic of Bilbao is that, as you can see in the picture, we live in a hole surrounded by mountains. And so we have plenty of neighborhoods climbing up these cliffs in the city. Bilbao has been an industrial city since the 19th century till the 90s, more or less. The port, as you can see in the picture, was occupying the riverbanks. the factories were occupying the only flat land that was in the valley next to the port. And so the city grew in the spaces between the factories, between the railways, and well, in the last, in the remaining space that was among all these infrastructures. This economical model of big factories connected with steel transformation in different kind of goods went into a deep crisis at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. And at the same time, in 1983, we suffered the worst floods of the century, and all the central part of the city was completely destroyed by the water. That is the point of the beginning of this transformation process, because at that point we decided not to rebuild what we had in the past, but to put the city in a different direction and to transform it from the industrial city that it was to the service providing city in which we have transformed it. In this work, it has been critical, the movement of the port of Bilbao. As previously I have said, was occupying the riverbanks. Since 1992, we have invested 500 million euros to move the port out of the city to the outer bay, as you can see in the picture. We have gained to the sea 2 million square meters in this time. And it's a very useful port that it has a very big depth by the docks, so we can receive all kind of ships in this space. But most important, the port in this new area has a wider space for having storage all the goods that they need for the ships. One space that it was impossible to gain in the middle of the city. And once the port has moved out of the city, we had free space to transform all these areas you can see in the picture. This was the flagship of this transformation process since the 90s. It's Abaunza. The master plan was designed by Cllr, and in a space that previously was occupied by a railway, that's this line that you can see in this part of the picture, a shipyard and different infrastructures connected with the port. We have developed this new development of the city in the central part of the city, which gathers the Guggenheim Museum, the Congress here in the left part, the Congress Palace of Euskaldun on the right side, the Iberdrola Tower, which is the headquarters of the main energy company of the Basque Country, and university buildings, are a commercial mall and different housing buildings. In this area, we gathered also quite a lot of Pritzker Prize architects, Frank Gehry, Rafael Moneo, Álvaro Siza, Ricardo Legorreta, César Pelli. So we have quite a lot of good architecture in this space gained to the port in the central part of the city. Here you have a view of this area. This was a container station that was by the museum, by the Guggenheim Museum. This building is this building. Now below this square, there is a parking for resident people and for rotation. And it's the new entrance to the Fine Art Museum, which is the structure that you can see here behind of the square. But probably the most important investment done through all this year has been the cleaning up of the river. The river was completely polluted because everything was thrown previously directly to the river. So there was zero oxygen, no life, heavy metal pollution, and we have invested nearly 1,000 million euros in 30 years to clean up the river. But no one comes to Bilbao to see this. They usually come for other issues, but it's important to have a clean and sustainable environment if you want to transform the city. Now the river is clean, we can play water sports, and life has come back again to the river. In terms of transport infrastructure, we invested quite a big amount of money in the new metro system. We have now 3 metro lines in service. We moved 91 million travelers per year, which is quite a lot for a metropolitan area of just 1 million inhabitants. In Bilbao, people used to walk and combine it with public transport. Recently, biking is also, the cycling is quite used because of the electrical bicycles. Because otherwise it's quite difficult to go up the mountains to get to upper neighborhoods. But as I have said, most of the people used to walk and use the public transport system. Culture has been also a motor in this transformation process. The Guggenheim Museum is the symbol of this transformation. The Guggenheim was built against everyone, because all the cultural movement of the Basque Country was against this, because they thought that it was Yankee cultural McDonald's coming to the city. And so we thought that it was important for putting again Bilbao in the map. And so we went ahead, although almost everyone was against this project. In just 4 years, we recuperated all the money invested in this museum through the increase in the tax income in the following years after the opening of the museum. But probably the most important works have been done through public-public cooperation in Bilbao, and is related with the elimination of the railway barriers. To make this possible, we work together, Spanish government, Basque government, land government of Vizcaya, and municipality of Bilbao, to restore these spaces and to join the neighborhoods that were divided by the railway in many different pieces. As you can see here in this picture, this is a Methola. The railway is still there underground. In fact, this is a new passenger railway station, but we have a new green area, and the housing that has been built around has helped us also paying the investment done that in this area to transform it completely. Here you have another view of another work done through this union of public institutions. Here, this building in the middle is the same that you can see here. The railway is still there below, but where previously there were cars and trains, now we have a pedestrian area with an elevator to solve accessibility to this building, with a playground, and so a more livable space and with a higher quality of life for the neighbors here. We built also new cultural facilities in this idea of making part of the economical activity from the culture, and using the culture as an element to increase the economical activity in the city. And so we built the new San Mamés football stadium, that's the one on the right, and the Bilbao Arena basketball stadium. Also, we transformed a former wine warehouse that was abandoned in the middle of the city into this huge facility, which is Escuna Centro Alhóndiga Bilbao, which is a culture and a sports center which gathers cinemas, art gallery, a huge library, and a sports center, and many other elements connected with modern culture, contemporary culture, that it has been done by the municipality using the design of Philippe Starck in this case. But also we have restored the old theaters like Arriaga Theater and Campos Elíseos Theater, the Campos Elíseos through public-private partnership. And the most important one has been the Euskalduna Music and Congress Palace, which gathers not only a wide cultural offer all the year long, but also an important space for economical activities for professional congresses and meetings that are held in our city. The most important concept probably for us is that this transformation process shouldn't be focused just in one part of the city, not only in the central part of the city, but the transformation must get to all the corners of the city. And here you have an example of what we call the neighborhood hearts. We go to that point of the neighborhood where people meet, where people gather, where people do their social life, and we transform it in a conversation with the neighbors living around and with the civil associations that work in that neighborhood. Here you have on the left side, a square in the neighborhood with the highest medium income of the city, and on the right side, and a square in the neighborhood with the lowest medium income of the city. The quality in the urban space, in the public space, in the public realm must be the same, and we must treat all the neighborhoods with the same, in the same way. Another example of this kind of interventions, this is Gaztelapico Park in Betolaza. Here, these buildings were built during the dictatorship in an old quarry. They were very close to this mountain, so they didn't have sunlight. And there was no green area in the neighborhood to have a proper neighborhood hut. So here, what we did is we cut this tip of the mountain. As you can see in this scheme, we cut the mountain 26 meters to generate this plain area, which is Gaztelapico Park. And so now the houses have sunlight and a proper space to gather next to their homes. As we live in a hole surrounded by mountains, also we need to connect. As in a heart you have your veins, we have the corridors to connect the neighborhood heart with the rest of the corners of the neighborhood, so we can generate new pedestrian corridors to connect all the parts of the neighborhood with the heart of it, and also to connect the different neighborhood hearts of the city among them. And to solve accessibility problems, we have built public elevators. We have now 45 public elevators built and 20 mechanical ramps and escalators, and we are building more and more every year to connect all this part of the city. Here we have another example of this. This was an abandoned train station in an upper neighborhood where we have developed a new square with a new green area and an elevator to connect this neighborhood heart with the upper neighborhood that you can see in the picture. In other places, the barrier was generated by the highway, and so we put the highway also underground through a different space to demolish the former existing brutal structures that were built during the dictatorship, as you can see in the picture in the left side. So now we have a green area and pedestrian space where previously there was that horrible concrete structure that you can see previously. Here in this case, instead, what we did is to put the highway below. We put it lower, in a lower level, so that we could generate the green area on top of the highway to reconnect that neighborhood that was divided by the highway. Talking now about projects that we are now developing and projects for the future. Now we are changing the city from the service providing city to the knowledge-based city, to the talent city. And so in this new transformation process, our flagship is the island of Cllr, which is a master plan designed by Zaha Hadid. It's an area of 838,000 square meters. We are planning 5,500 new housing units, 50% of them affordable and social housing and 50% of free, but also with 2 urban technoparks, universities, and job training schools also. And we are going to gain 7.5 kilometers of waterfront promenades in all this area. We started the urbanization of this area not many years ago. In 2018, we opened finally the canal because this was an artificial peninsula that was built during the dictatorship for the port. And the island, we can say, that was born in 2018. And the right river bank of all this area is already urbanized. The first buildings have already been built and they are already occupied, as you can see in the picture. And now we are focusing in the urbanization of the island. All this space is flat, risk protected. And so we are taking on account also the rise in the height of the sea level that could be here, so that all these houses are protected even if the sea level goes up. Here another view of this pedestrian promenade in the waterfront of this area of Cllr. And another project that we are planning for the future is the Abaunza Central Station. It's a huge space occupied by the railway in the middle of the city, which is dividing these 2 neighborhoods that you can see in the top right picture. And so here we are planning to put underground also the train, with the high-speed train in the lowest level, the commuter train in the first level. And that way we are going to build a central park in this area. And we are going to open this space connecting these 2 neighborhoods that are actually divided by this railway infrastructure. And my last slide is this one, which is another cultural project. We still are working in new cultural projects for the city, which is an enlargement of the Fine Art Museum. The project selected is designed by Foster & Partners and Luis Mario Uriarte Arquitectura. It's going to provide 7,300 square meters more for the museum. And we expect to have this work finished in 2023. And that's all. Thank you. I think I have fixed my time.
Thank you very much indeed, Asier. That was actually, that was perfect timing. So some really interesting points there. And I know I can see the questions coming in. So I think we're going to have a really interesting Q&A. It's clear that Bilbao had a proud industrial heritage, which actually informed the spatial strategy of the city. which then had to be unpicked once the city actually changed its course. So again, some really interesting things there that I think is going to come through in the conversation, as I can see in the questions coming through. So thank you for that. And I'm now going to pass over to Erlijn Mulder at Utrecht. Are we there, Erlijn?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much.
Somebody
Victoria.
behind the scenes is fantastically managing all the videos, so I thank you to whoever that is.
Yeah, thank you, Olga.
Welcome, Erlijn, and over to you.
Okay, I would like to share some of the insights of Utrecht, how to develop a healthy city, and also how to transform your city into a healthier one, and what we could do about that. First, about Utrecht. We're a medieval center. In 2022, we will celebrate our 900th anniversary. So we are medieval, but we have also Roman roots. Historical city center, but and we are in the middle of the country, so very connected as well. Half an hour by Schiphol Airport, by car and by train. So it's very easy to get to the rest of Europe as well. Well, as you mentioned before, we're a bicycle city. We weren't in the 1970s. We transformed into a bicycle city, but at the moment we're the most bicycle-friendly city in the world, or the second. And we're also a transportation hub. We have the biggest central station of the country, and the head office of the public transport office is also based in Utrecht. And the central station area is very important to us because it also divides our city center in two, because Utrecht is the fastest growing city in the Netherlands. And well, we have to accommodate all those new people, new houses, new traffic. And we have a lot of challenges. I would like to share some of our challenges, not all of them, of course, but I think every city can relate to those challenges. That when you're growing, it's getting more crowded. And we have somehow a little doubtful honor to have the first bicycle traffic jam in the world in 2014. And this is the spot where it happens, as you can see. With more people, we have more air pollution and also more noise. Also, two factors you can reduce by accommodating more cyclists in the city. And more people also means less public space, or more challenges for your public space as well. In 2015, we developed a strategy about healthy urban living, where we placed health and in the heart of our urban strategy. And health is something everybody can relate to as a person, but as a city as well. And it also confronts you with the dilemmas, the urban dilemmas, and the questions you have to solve. So it's a comprehensive approach based on people, but also our economy and our urban planning. So it's about healthy environment, healthy economy, and healthy lifestyle. And we formulated all kinds of ambitions, but also the challenges that we face. For our urban spatial strategy, we have defined our core values, that we're the meeting point, but also Utrecht is based in a very green landscape. So it's very accessible to get to nature resort spaces. We're also the knowledge hub on life sciences and health in the Netherlands. People who live here, but also who would like to, reside here, say it has a human scale. And I think for cities that are growing, a human scale is very important. And the historical part is very important for our city as well, also in the development, that we cherish that part. And in the urban strategy, we like to, when we build new neighborhoods, we like to connect those dots that are important for us. So when we build new neighborhoods, we also look to green factors, education, culture, playground, sports. It all has, it has a part in the development of that new neighborhood. The next step that we're working on at the moment is our public transport system and bike and pedestrians first, so that people have choices which kind of transport they would like to use. And I have a few cases I would like to share with you how we have been working on those developments. And one of the insights of last year's, when I was at the Academy, the ceremony meeting, I thought it's nice to talk about all the best practices that we have, but some of our best examples are the hardest fought for. And you can see in this picture a very beautiful surrounding with waterways and green, but it used to be something completely different, because this was what it was. It was an 8-lane highway, and we restored it into a waterway. It used to be a waterway until the 1960s. Then with increasing car traffic, we thought we have to accommodate everything. And we built an 8-way high lane. And we have been restoring this the last 20 years. It took us 20 years to restore this urban fault, as I could say. These are some pictures of the restoration. We did it in phases because we started in 2000 with a small part, and then the economic crisis came, and it was part of our political negotiations as well. Could we finance this restoration? But we knew because of a referendum in 2000 that the community was very much for this, this development. So we continued. And as you can see in this particular part, this is the busiest cycle path in the Netherlands. And we just kept through with this along the building of this, this waterway. So it was a huge challenge for us, also in a logistical way. And this is how it is now. We have completely transformed it. And we opened the completely restored waterway last month, and immediately everybody was using it. And what struck me was also the psychological effect of the restoration as well. Everybody was really happy that we could use the water again, and that it was part of our city center as well. Another one is our Daphne Schippers Bridge. This is a cycle bridge and a pedestrian bridge that connects a new part of our city where 80,000 residents live and the old part of the city. And it's solely used by cyclists and pedestrians. It also took us 20 years to build this. And the residents of the old neighborhood were very much against it because they were afraid that all these cyclists would be a threat to the livability of their neighborhood. And also the design of the bridge at first was very steep, so they just didn't believe it. And it took us a lot of sessions with all kinds of partners and citizens in order to make a new design, which is here. As you can see, it has a very large curve. It's very well used from the very beginning, but as I said, it took us 20 years to develop this bridge. And when it opened, the newspapers' headlines were, "This is the bridge that no one was waiting for." And it was an instant success from the very first day. The people from the new neighborhood on the other side of the canal, they now mockily say, "We live in Ogenal North," which is the name of the old neighborhood. And they also see the value of their houses increase massively since the bridge was opened, because this is a very friendly, family-friendly neighborhood with high-level, high-worth houses. And so the people from the neighborhood on the other part of the canal now profit from that reputation as well. You see here, this is a primary school, and the cycle bridge crosses the rooftop of the primary school, and it's part of the concept. In the next one, you see it's a rooftop garden where the children can have their vegetables grow, and the other part of the rooftop is a solar panel rooftop. We have a covenant with all the schools in Utrecht that we can use their rooftops to install solar panels, because we want to have the most solar panels in the country, which we achieved within 5 years, because we asked companies and schools and other public organizations to use their rooftops. The Cruzelaan is a circular street but it used to look completely different. This is a corridor. It used to be a corridor to the city center as well, one of the main corridors for car traffic, and we simply cut it off. Well, simply is a little short to say. This is how it looked like in the 1960s. As you can see, very broad ways to accommodate all the cars. And as I said, we cut it off, made a parking garage on our square in front of the central station. This is the western part of our central station. This used to be also an industrial area, but it now is transforming into a city center area. So the Cllr is a very important part to make it attractive and livable as well. It's a green space. We used all kind of reused all kind of arts that we still had. We stimulate active mobility, and also created a bridge across the central station for bikes and pedestrians, so they could easily come from one part of the city center to the other part. We transformed a gas station into a local restaurant. And the square is shared space for walks, bikes, and sports. So in the middle, you see all kinds of sport facilities people can use. And Wonderwoods is one of the projects designed by Boeri, who also designed the building in Milan, and they are developing it currently at the Cllr as well. Smaller projects are also very important, also for our colleagues from the traffic department. They had to collaborate with colleagues from the public space department. They speak different languages sometimes, and they helped each other also in developing this citizen-centric approach on public space. What we also discovered when we talked with citizens and entrepreneurs of this particular square, the entrepreneurs requested to get rid of the cars and the car spaces, and we would never have expected that, but they already saw that other parts of the city center where cars were not allowed to come or to park their car, they had much bigger revenues than they had. So when you have an attractive surrounding and you can easily walk or cycle, then it's also easier to stop by and get into a shop. This is another example. As you can see in the left part, it's with all kinds of car traffic and very car-centric. Together with entrepreneurs and citizens, we designed a completely new crossroad where it's where people are encouraged to use slow types of traffic, and cars are stimulated to lower their speed. And because it's so green and you have all kinds of possibilities to have terraces, etc., it's a place where people can dwell and meet each other at the moment. What we also discovered, if you redesign your street and make it harder for cars to speed up or even go through, you get 30% less cars, but 20% more cyclists. So it really, it contributed to our goals as well. So I have a few lessons to share. Talk with people, not at them. It sounds quite easily, but we really trained our colleagues from the different departments to have meaningful conversations with all kinds of stakeholders, and also in designing those sessions and those conversations. So we trained them in appreciative inquiry, designing work sessions, etc. It was very funny also with colleagues from mobility and urban planning to do so. Focus, health really helped us to keep focus on the purpose of the future of our city, and also to define what the challenges and the assignments are for our city. Keep your partners involved. What we discovered is that our partners often have very, very bright ideas, much brighter than we could have come up with. And so if you ask questions to them as well, you can really have a shared goal. And that is my my next point. Start with asking questions, not the solutions. You can see a rooftop of a bus stop. We have 300 bus stops in our city, and we had a tender for new bus stops, which we wanted to have sustainable. And one of the companies came up with the idea to make also a contribution to biodiversity. So the rooftops of the bus stops are bee friendly, and it went viral internationally. And from Shanghai to Vienna to all kinds of places in the world, they wanted to have the same bus stops. We were quite, how do you say that? It was oh my gosh, I can't find the English word, I'm sorry. Well, the last lesson is enjoy the results as well. If you see what the results are from in 5 years' time, it's, I think, a huge result, and it really binds each other as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, excuse me. Thank you, Erlijn. That was really interesting. A lot there. I think one of the things I really pulled out from that was seeing the benefits of connected thinking between the city department, so infrastructure and education, then to come up with an innovative idea of the bridge over the school and the photovoltaic. So it's this really kind of connective, innovative thinking. Lots of questions are coming in, which is great. And I think we now need to move into our Q&A session. So Olga, I don't know if you wouldn't mind just arranging our videos to suit.
Yes, everything is ready if you...
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to start with one question, and actually I think it's been picked up by a couple of people, but this is the question that I really struggle with. Appreciating that cities are organisms that have been around, these particular ones we're talking about, for hundreds of years. And when we're moving forward, there's a balance of quick wins and long-term strategies. And in all of the cities, we've seen some really substantial, significant, transformative initiatives that have required some serious commitment and undertaking, some taking 10, 20 years. My question is, what measures do you take to enshrine the vision so that the idea, the commitment sits outside, for example, a political cycle, or sits outside a financial crisis? How do you get that buy-in so that you know that your intention will be delivered all the way through? Asier, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind, because I know this is a really big challenge for Bilbao.
In our case, the most important element was the urban plan that was approved in 1995. We have almost complete 90% of what was defined in that urban plan. And now we are approving the next urban plan for the next 20 years. We expect to have it approved finally for July next year, 2021. We have been working on it last 7 years in this new urban plan. 4,000 citizens have taken part in the discussions of this new urban plan, which I think it's quite a big amount of people when we are talking about urbanism and urban law and regulations, which is quite hard for common people to understand. And we try to simplify the language of the urban planning so that everybody could take part in these discussions. And that is why we got this participation of 4,000 people. And we did it in 1995, and we are doing actually. We tried to get to a wide minimum agreement among all the political parties. I mean, the plan that we are now approving is not the plan of my political party, it's not the plan of the actual government, it's the plan of the municipality. So we try to have a minimum political agreement about the foundations of this new urban plan that we are going to develop the next 20 years. And then if there are changes in different public institutions in the following years, probably there are projects that can be shaped a little bit different from the ones that we thought years ago. But there is no discussion about the project that is going to be developed in this part of the city. Then, as I have said, each political party can share and discuss if the building should be red, blue, or yellow, but there's no discussion about that here is going to be a building.
Okay.
And I think that is the clue in the case of the transformation of Bilbao, that we are able to get to wide agreements with all the citizens, or most of the citizens, with most of the political parties, and also among different institutional levels. So there is no discussion with other institutions when we are going to develop a project that probably needs the help of the others, because the competences are not in the hand of the municipality, for example.
Okay, that's interesting, because one of the messages there, I think, is actually involving the citizens, so that they've got buy-in to the plan, as it were. Because Stephen, I know when we had the conversation, and you mentioned earlier that every couple of years you take the temperature, I think was the phrase that you used, of your citizens. Is that one of the ways or methods that you use, I suppose, in terms of being able to establish the direction?
Well, in terms of direction, I think we have a similar situation as Bilbao. The big harbour plans, for example, took place in the last century, 1990s. And the main master plan was developed and won in a competition in 2000. But the whole point is here that there has to be some kind of consensus across all the parties. Mm. And that has been a buy-in continuously in the last 20 years. We're in a position that we can revisit these plans, and the plan must be robust enough to absorb the new tendencies and the new directions maybe the citizens want to go in, or even, for example, after the economic recession, things could alter, the focus could change.
Yeah.
So they have to be able to adapt, and then we draw up new possibilities and get another type of consensus with the politicians. But the most recent plans, they're also including a lot of citizens' engagement, public meetings, walkabouts, cycling trips, meetings at the Dome, lectures, all sorts of different directions, coming from different directions, and trying to work in obviously in a holistic way. A little, of course, I think we're doing the same thing both in Utrecht and Bilbao. We have these special competencies, but we have to learn to speak together. And I think this is something that's become patently obvious over the last 4 or 5 years. I think that if we're going to have engagement, we need to include in a certain language where everyone can be involved. And I think architects and engineers have to learn to speak slightly differently. We talk differently at an architect school.
What are you trying to say, Stephen?
When you're sitting in an architect school, they have a certain language, and it has to be adjusted. And as a city architect, I've been a kind of translator sometimes, because the politicians look at me and say, "What did they just say?"
Yeah. Okay.
Got you. And those visualizations, we know they're cheating. It's always sunny on these visualizations, So we have to have some kind of level of pragmatism across it, so that everyone can be involved.
So I think that's interesting. There's a couple of messages coming out here in terms of engaging, but also being kind of, if you like, bipartisan, if you like, bringing together the different political bodies. Erlijn, have you anything that you'd like to add to that? I know, for example, with your sort of strategic change of your waterways, you mentioned that there was a referendum attached to that.
Yes, that was also to involve the citizens. But the referendum was just one thing, and during those years, a lot of the plans have changed as well. But the waterway stayed, and I think because it had a very symbolic function for the people and the community. And the other part I would like to address as well, it's very important to keep the citizens involved and to have meaningful conversations with them. On the other hand, it also takes political courage to keep your focus, and to also sometimes you have to take the lead in plans and the course that your city is heading to, which other partners not really see at that moment. And well, it's not opposite of it's not opposite of the citizens, but you have it's a game, so to say, I think. And you have to adapt to those circumstances. At some point, you have to have political courage as well as a councillor, I think.
Absolutely. I agree entirely. I think one of the important points here is that the 4 major projects in Aarhus, the opening up of the river, everyone was against it.
Exactly.
Because it was a main thoroughway and everyone said it would go wrong in terms of traffic. But it's turned around to be one of the most successful urban interventions ever. Yeah. Similarly, along the harbour front, I haven't shown any of these images, but the whole idea of removing 4 lanes down to 2 lanes of road was just a political nightmare. And it just means the whole area becomes more accessible so that you can actually walk and become recreative in terms of the harbour front. And it's the same with the music house. No one wanted a concert hall at the start. What about, more elderly homes, kindergartens and so on. But most Danish second cities have a concert house now because it's become so successful. So, I mean, I do believe in the bottom up, but we also have to have visions, big visions like you have in Bilbao. And you've got to be prepared as a politician to take that battle up and fight for it
and demonstrate strong leadership ability. With
exactly.
Yeah. And, if you don't mind, I'm going to move the conversation along because I know I said there's a whole host of questions, and I'm going to ask David Lum, who's a joint lead assessor. David, are you there with one of your questions for the speakers?
Yes, hi, thank you.
Well done for unmuting yourself.
Yes, very important. I had the pleasure of visiting all 3 of these cities that we've heard from today, and absolutely fascinating, amazing cities. So much that needs to be talked about and taken as a way forward for us in the UK. We've touched already on cities are for people. I think someone said that earlier today. Aarhus has 34 local citizen councils, which is fantastic for one city, which is, I'm just looking at my city, Leeds, and we are struggling to have an inclusive approach. We had the localism bill, 9 years ago now? Localism, does it exist in the UK, I ask? So the question is, and Asier, you're not going to like this, but you did, I think you said, didn't you, that in Bilbao you live in a hole surrounded by mountains? Did you actually say that? Because your job is to do major civil engineering projects just to rescue the city from its position, and that again to do with people. How do you deal with people? I think the Citizens' House in Aarhus is really interesting because that's in the centre of the city. It's a dome, fantastic place to have meetings, and that works. How do you do, Asier, in Bilbao, have that dialogue with the citizens? Do you have a similar structure? Is it in the culture of the Basque people to be part of the decision-making process?
Well, first of all, yes, I have said that we live in a hole surrounded by mountains because in Bilbao we call our own city El Bocho, which means the hole. So it was a stinky hole in the 90s, and now it's a brighter hole, but we still live in a hole surrounded by mountains. And we have a decentralized administration in the municipality. We have 8 urban districts. In any of these districts, any citizen can take part in the discussions. And we used to bring to all these districts all the projects that we are going to develop. So when we are going to transform a street, a square, or when we are going to build a new public facility, we bring the plan, the information that is needed about this project to these districts, and we discuss directly with the neighbors that live there in these spaces. As Stephen has said, we take on account bottom-up information, but sometimes there are some issues that you cannot do because you need to do something because the city needs something different. For example, now we are planning to build a new school of the University of the Basque Country in terms of medicine studies, and it's in a very dense space of the city, and neighbors living next to this a university building wanted a green area where it's going to be the building of the university, but the university is for the whole city. So I have told them we will try to get as much as green as we can, but we need to put the university there. So we try to take on account all the inputs that we get from the people in these discussions. In many cases, we develop the project once we have a wide agreement with most of the people living in the neighborhood. Sometimes it's not possible, but as much as we can, we try to get to these positions. In some occasions, I must admit that it has happened the opposite thing. I mean, as urban planners, we had a clear idea of what we wanted in a certain part of the city, and we have crashed directly with the opinion of the neighbors living in the neighborhood. So we said, okay, I have tried to, and if we cannot, we will not do it. But as far as we can, we try to get to agreements with all of the people. Yeah.
Thank you.
And with regards to Erlijn, I know that's part very much of your culture, is like talking to your community and understanding how you can match your priorities with their ambitions. Are there any, you had a really nice series of questions, I suppose, attached to that. Was there any one example that you could relay that you think just worked very well that we could all learn from?
An example which worked very well in terms of dealing with citizens and their interests.
Yes, and then helping them come to a good decision with yourselves.
Yeah, well, actually, the last slide I showed with where I said enjoy the results is an example of a spot in near the central station. It's the ugliest spot at the moment of our central station area. And we wanted to build a massive cultural house over there. And there was one political council who was against it. And that was the decisional vote. And then we started to ask all the citizens and people that passed by that spot what they would like to have over there. And we said to the developers that it was crucial in their plans that we would like to see how they would involve those ideas and the citizens in developing a new plan for that spot. And we're very proud of the results at the moment. There were still some developers who said, oh, we have a great plan, this is it. And we said, yeah, well, we don't think you really listened to what we wanted. We wanted that you had involved the citizens with your plans as well and show how you were going to do that. Meanwhile, you're building it as well. And so now we're very pleased with the developer because it is not just about the plans, it's more than that. And I think, yeah, that is one of the most recent examples, I think, in how we, but it was also the project manager who was really keen on making the conversation with the stakeholders and how to do so. So she really invested in that process.
That's great, thank you. I've got a question from the panel, and it's from Stefano Smith, and I would ask him to relay the question himself, but he's actually given quite a few questions, so he probably doesn't know which one I'm about to suggest. So it was substantially a question for Stephen in terms of your urban experiments. Which were your top 3 urban experiments that you thought could be transferable to other places?
An interesting one. I think the greening of the city, the forest one, and also the one at the music house and the town hall, the park. I call, you know, bringing nature into the city. This is very relevant now. I know we're talking about biodiversity and things. I think that's got to be the big one. The second one was the one in front of the railway station, because it really did make people's eyes open up, or ears open up, for the change in the urban environment, that you could actually hear birds. Okay. And you could hear conversations. And until then, it's just a massive transport hub. And of course, it's necessary to have taxis and buses and parking areas and stuff like that. But it was a wonderful opportunity to say, time out, let's see what had happened. What what if we did this? What positives can we get out of it? And as I said, it's a wonderful discussion in the town chamber. It's discussed in the newspapers. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Okay, all
The
right.
third one, I think, has got to be working in the challenged housing district with the Instant City, where we have temporary structures for children and activities, whilst we're waiting to do the major projects, that we introduce the idea of temporarity. And a close fourth is obviously the creative area around the freight yard, where it's actually temporary design on long term becoming more permanent. And this is a very interesting transition because had it not happened, it would have just a business as usual.
Mhm.
And it's opened up people's eyes for this whole idea of, well, we don't all have to be the same. Perhaps we can have, there's 350,000 different people in Aarhus, and there's groups who want to be together. So that I like this idea of the quirkiness, making areas where quirky is acceptable. You know what I mean?
So making
I know this.
idea that
I know
the city is
Dave
for
is
everybody.
exactly.
Yeah.
You can't please everyone. So let's make some enclaves where things can happen.
And allow the unusual to happen.
Yeah,
I'm going to. Sorry to interrupt
Thank
again.
you for the question, Stefano.
No, it's a very good question. And I'm going to hopefully bring in Philip Jackson, also one of the assessors, for a question. Philip, are you there?
Yeah.
Don't forget to unmute yourself. Excellent, well done.
I've been really impressed by the presentations this afternoon. So much is whizzing around in my head at the moment. It's actually quite difficult to think about a really good question. But maybe just continuing on the whole issue about inclusivity and quirkiness and actually unplanned space as well. I'd just like to keep that conversation going a little bit more in a way. There's people always, Stephen mentioned about the homeless or city people, but there's other groups as well. And it'd be interesting, I had discussed before with Asier about people who are a bit more out of the mainstream as well, and how are they included in all the processes as part of a city.
You directing that at anybody in particular to start with?
No, it's just more of a comment, but maybe Stephen should continue, but I'd like to hear from everyone on it, really.
Well, it's dear to my heart. I coined the phrase city people because they actually live in the urban realm all day and often at night. And it's tried to lift them out of this category called homeless, which is very negative. And the whole idea of working with bottom up is to encourage inclusiveness, because we talk about a good city for everyone. I mean it quite seriously, that we have to have everyone included. But I've also learned that it's very difficult to get all these different groups to be together in one space. So it's perhaps a good idea to find areas where people feel more comfortable, but they have to be included in that discussion. We've actually made certain hotspots and try to spread them out around the city, but you can nudge people to go there, but you can't force them. So if you want to have success, you have to make areas where people feel comfortable, and they have to be included in that process. So we have advisory groups, we have specialist people to participate in that discussion, who are very patient and socially minded to go into it. It's not everyone's cup of tea, I have to say. So you have to find the right types of people to work these types of challenges. But we're reaping the benefits now, because it's something we've chosen 3 areas in the town we would like to concentrate and discuss this idea of city people and how they can be managed and included in the design of it. But it takes time. There's no quick fix, as you might say, with that little station where you can go down and do your injection and what have you. It's nothing like that. It's a long process, but worthy.
I agree with this last point of Stephen, but I think that it's also important that you need to have a strong social care net in the city, not to leave anyone in the backside. I mean, because apart from the projects that Stephen, for example, has shown, I think that it's important to work directly with the people that has this important and basic social needs. And for that, you need to have a social care net that is working properly and with enough resources to provide what these people need to live with dignity and with quality. Apart from that, I think that also it's important to provide public help for the rehabilitation or the regeneration of the existing city. We haven't talked about that, but I think it's also very important. In our case, we provide subsidies both from the municipality and from the Basque government, depending on the income of the family. So in many cases, we can get nearly to 70–80% of the budget that need to be invested in a house to be rebuilt, to be refurbished, depending on the income of the family. If you have a high income, of course, probably you will not get any money from the public institution. But if you have a low income, then you will have a proportional help from the public institutions to help the community refurbish the building. And we have done this work in many neighborhoods that have a lot of social problems. In many cases, the solution is not to provide subsidies to the community to restore the building, but you need to demolish the building. In those cases also, we have built new housing blocks in the same neighborhood to relocate those families in social housing in the same neighborhood where they have their roots, so that they are not put out of their space. They are not cut. They don't cut their social relationship with the rest of the neighbors, so they keep living in the same neighborhood. But in this case, in a proper social house that is built in their neighborhood, and that way we can demolish those low quality buildings that we have. In many cases, built during the dictatorship in Bilbao. We have a lot of problems that came from Franco's dictatorship in our case in Bilbao, where when a lot of buildings were built without any planning and with low quality materials. And so nowadays we are still solving those problems that we get from the dictatorship.
Oh, interesting. That was nice.
Thanks, Asier. I think you made some very good points there about actually it's about creating physical support, but also actual
social,
personal, social support as well. And I know visiting Utrecht, for example, and it's the same with all of the cities actually, rapidly expanding cities, and it's making sure that everybody feels part of that growth. And one of your strategies from memory, Erlijn, was actually creating neighbourhood centres, like neighbourhood buildings, with a focus of being able to bring people together and they could take ownership. Is that something that you'd like to touch on briefly, just to close out this conversation on bringing together the community?
Yeah, we have neighborhood buildings and neighborhood teams. So a lot of our strategy is, we expanded our strategy actually from healthy urban living to healthy urban living for everyone, because it's about inclusiveness and equity in your city. And when you're expanding so rapidly, the social problems also expand. And you see a few challenges. That is about affordable housing. It's about preventing social exclusion. And so we created neighborhood buildings. We already have them for a longer period, but also neighborhood teams, and they are multidisciplinary integrated. So there's a doctor in it, but also psychologists, and so all kinds of institutions that are working based in the neighborhood itself, and they are in close contact with families who are in trouble, so they could detect all kinds. Most of the time it's multi-problem families, so it's very hard to come with, you can't come with one solution. It's always the one problem creates another one, and the one solution creates another problem. So it's what Stephen already mentioned, not a quick fix, but homelessness is something. Well, the strategy is to prevent homelessness, So we work also closely with the social housing organizations. And when they see, for instance, that there's a lack in payments, or that the electricity bills are not being paid off, so that the community, the neighborhood teams can get in contact with those families as well. It's it is really how do you say that? And the nitty-gritty part of working in a city as well.
Yeah,
I think.
that's a good expression.
Yes, thank you. And there's another question that have come through from a few people. I appreciate we're running out of time, so it's a slightly more granular question, but sort of still on this theme of actually reaching out to your citizens and your community in terms of the place that we are in the world, that it's quite hard to have big meetings and events. What sort of digital or other platforms have you just found to be of use that people have most engaged with? Have you found anything? Stephen, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to make you aware. I did show some images of different digital methods we're using in Aarhus. All of our public engagement meetings at the moment take place online. And they're often going through those small local council groups, and they often have representatives taking part in the meeting, and then we have the chat line constantly, and we have a facilitator like yourself who gathers the questions up so we can have a discussion. So we've also found that we can go into subgroups and have small workshop sessions during these events, so that we can meet again on the same platform to discuss their conclusions. So we're trying to be very participatory. Obviously, it's not like being in a big school hall and working together on a project as we're accustomed to, but we're also finding that maybe there's more and other types of people participating, which would not necessarily have been there, because either they have to leave their home whilst it's tea time, but you can actually do it whilst you're still at home, and and participate.
So you found that it's actually your reach has in some way.
Well, this is what we're trying to find out, if that's happening.
And it'd be interesting if there's any empirical evidence to support what's going to work.
Yeah, and obviously we also encourage people to write in. We have a digital platform on our homepage in the council, which is accessible when we're doing local plans or specific projects, so people can go in at any time and contribute. And this is a brave new world for us. We'd had it before the crisis, but it's actually becoming a very useful platform to work with.
That's really helpful, actually. Yeah,
I think it's really cool. And we've got some, I mean, I'm not an IT person, so we've got really good talent around who are, we're willing to experiment. And we have some terrible meetings sometimes because the technique's not working, but then we arrange another one and then it's better.
Yeah, so it's actually learning by doing, which is
I think so.
Yeah,
and I think we try to explain.
Sorry, I'm very conscious. I always feel like I'm cutting you off, Stephen. I've got a very quick question for Erlijn, because I can see we're running out of time, and it's a question that quite a few people have been asking, and it's changing the subject ever so slightly, so apologies. But going back to bringing sort of cycles and reducing car use in cities, one of the questions that we get asked quite a lot is there any empirical evidence to show that it does help with greater footfall, and it does help with our high streets in terms of greater commercial activity? I know it's a very quick response, I'm afraid, given the time, but have you found that you have been able to gather some empirical evidence?
Yes, there has been done some research about the economic growth in the high streets, and there is evidence that it's beneficial for the shop owners. So, and we made about the health issue. We had the first environmental area that banned cars, diesel cars, in the city center, and the noise of the air pollution was decreased that's the word, huh? Decreased by 30% in the first period. So that was a huge benefit.
Yes.
And well, as part of cycling, I mean, moving is of course very healthy, active moving, but it's also very social because you're able to talk with each other during cycling as well.
I found that actually when we were in Utrecht that we were cycling in pairs so that we could actually have a conversation.
Yeah,
so that the pace was reduced subsequently.
Yeah, and there's another thing which I said, noise pollution, often overlooked, but a very car-centric city has a lot of noise. And so we have lots of visitors from abroad who say, it's so quiet over here, but that is because we have so many cyclists over cars. So that's something we didn't realize, but we got that comment from other people from abroad. So yeah, all kinds of health benefits, I think.
Yeah. And a final question for, I've just got a message. I've been asked if I could maybe wrap up. So yes, so thank you, everybody. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have. I've enjoyed reconnecting with you guys and revisiting the cities in our conversations leading up to this. And we really, really appreciate you participating in this event. And I can tell from the messages there's been lots of goodwill that's been sent in everybody's direction. So thank you very much. And maybe we can pick up some of these questions offline and somehow post them somewhere, and hopefully we'll see you all soon in our sort of more connected meeting as well.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Has been a
David
pleasure.
and Jacob. Thank you very much for arranging this.
Yes, thank you, Stephen, Asier and Erlijn. Fantastic.
Lovely. Nice lunchtime.
Yes, yeah.
Very good. No lunch, but a great lunchtime.
You can have your sandwich now.
See you next week for town.
Yes.
Hello,
yes.
Pam.
Yes, we look forward to that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
See
Thank
you
you.
there.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Catch up soon.
Yes.